In hardcore classic WoW, dungeons prove to be a consistent stop for all players both on their way to level 60 and at max level. While dungeons are the source of a great amount of loot that almost every player covets to some degree, they also often prove to be the source of death for many players, many times resulting in multiple casualties in no time at all. Here's the deadliest thing in every dungeon in WoW Classic Hardcore and how they will kill you. This video will go in level order, starting with Ragefire Chasm and ending with the max level dungeons. Now let's get to our first entry. Ragefire Chasm, an early game horde only dungeon found within Orgrimmar, is probably the easiest dungeon in the game, and it can actually be quite hard to die in here. The bosses are no real threat here, and the mob packs are generally not too difficult to deal with, though the room full of trogs at the beginning can be a little tricky. Even so, the most dangerous thing inside this dungeon is definitely the lava. In Classic WoW, lava does a flat amount of damage regardless of your level, and when you are only say level 15 or so, that damage happens to be enough to just one-shot you. This means a minor slip-up that ends with you in the lava is pretty much certain doom. Basically, don't jump in the lava here, and you will be fine. The Wailing Caverns around level 20 is actually quite a dicey dungeon at this low of a level, and has quite a few things to look out for. The various trash packs of this place, with the Deviate Guardians and the Druids of the Fang, can actually be hard to deal with, but the deadliest thing in here is definitely Verdun the Ever-Living, the second to last boss of the instance. Verdun hits extremely hard for an enemy at this level, and can easily 2 or 3 shot an undergeared player at this level. A warrior tank with a shield, and a priest constantly healing them can even not be enough to survive Verdun with enough crits or crushing blows, so it is always important to have a backup plan when taking him on. Around the same level bracket in Westfall, the Dead Mines, a fan favorite dungeon, is probably the deadliest of the early game dungeons with a lot of room for things to go wrong. The most obvious of them is most definitely the boat at the end of the dungeon with Van Cleef atop it. This boat has a crazy amount of enemies on it, with many patrols and dense mob packs that can cause a lot of trouble for unprepared groups. It is very easy to pull extra mobs on this boat via the vertical platforms or the few patrols. The Squall Shapers with their Frost Nova also make this area quite tricky to deal with. Luckily, there are many reset spots around the boat, so if you know what's coming, it is easy to deal with, as you can pretty easily escape. Next, with Shadowfang Keep, the mid-level 20 dungeon in Silverpine, the Lupine Horror Room near the end of the instance is super dangerous and is one of the scariest rooms in any dungeon, but I think Archmage Aurigal is definitely the deadliest enemy in here. The level 26 boss is probably the first boss most players will fight, with mechanics in an actual complex moveset. Aurigal's Void Bolts hit extremely hard and should be line of sighted. His 5-second AoE stun is very annoying and can result in your death if your group isn't prepared. His teleport can be pretty annoying as well, but worst of all is Aurigal's Curse, a mind control he will randomly place on a party member, which is extremely dangerous. If this is cast on your tank or healer, not only will the Curse player do hefty damage, but you'll also have to contend with Aurigal's damage output as well. This can get really out of hand, mainly if your group's damage is low and 1 or 2 mind controls go out in a single fight. Real quick, if you are enjoying the video so far, make sure to like and subscribe for more WoW content in the future. Seeing as a lot of my viewers aren't subscribed, if you find yourself to be a returning viewer, make sure to sub, as it really helps me out. Anyways, back to the video. Now for the Alliance-only stockades in Stormwind, this place is actually relatively easy, but if anything is going to kill you, it would probably be the boss Basil Thread and his henchmen. This boss is a level 29 human and has 2 guards that fight with him during his encounter. This is the only real source of difficulty for this fight, since the adds can make the damage output of the boss a little annoying to deal with, in combination with his battle shout. Additionally, the Smoke Bomb Thread performs will do an AoE 4-second stun, which, if used when the adds are still alive, can cause your tank to take a pretty considerable amount of damage very quickly, with a brief period of minimal counterplay. If we look to Black Fathom Deeps in Ashenvale, this can actually be a pretty scary dungeon in the latter half if you don't know what you are doing. While obviously doing 4 candles in here would be the most dangerous thing, I'm not going to count that as most players won't attempt that. So I would say the mob packs before Twilight Lord Kelris is the most dangerous. This large room is full of water and requires the navigation of tight corridors that are filled to the brim with large enemy packs upwards of 4 or 5. This is a real struggle for groups who do not pay attention and don't use CC or ranged pull with line of sighting. This is because many of the enemies here are casters that can do pretty hefty damage. By far the most annoying enemy here is the Twilight Shadow Mages with their Dominate Mind ability, because mind controls can always be very scary when on the wrong target, especially when these mob packs are so plentiful already and require a lot of kicks to handle. For Nomergon, we have a pretty clear-cut winner for the most dangerous thing in here, and that is the final hallway of the dungeon and the Dark Iron agents within. This hallway is split into two parts, the upper and lower sections, both filled with various enemies consisting of annoying patrols, alarmo bots that will social aggro more enemies, but worst of all, the Dark Iron agents. These guys can spawn in packs upwards of 4 or 5, and are very annoying for their Dark Iron landmine ability, which will place one on the ground that will arm in 10 seconds if not killed. These mines do massive AoE damage and can almost one-shot squishy characters. These make positioning really important, which is exacerbated by the fact that you can pull the entire opposite section of the hallway if you stand it too close to the ledge, due to how mob pathing works, which, if that happens, has a very high likelihood of a few deaths occurring at least. Now for Razorfen Crawl, found at the south area of the Barrens. This instance is actually pretty easy to tackle if you are at an appropriate level, and there aren't very many things that are particularly imposing. Odds are the most likely way to die in here will just be over pulling, as there are actually a lot of rooms with a pretty considerable amount of enemies closely packed within, in addition to quite a few patrols scattered throughout the dungeon. Ranged pulling in here is very important, and if you decide not to, you will make your life way harder than it needs to be. Next, for Scarlet Monastery, a pretty big dungeon with a lot of dangerous things within. I would say the deadliest thing in here is probably just overpulling in general, but most prominently in the Cathedral Wing in the courtyard. This area of the dungeon has a lot of enemies and multiple patrols within, making it extremely easy to chain pull enemy after enemy, which can quickly spiral out of control. A lot of these enemies are quite annoying too, primarily the sorcerers having blizzards, slows, and frostbolts to greatly inhibit your movement. Another thing to note for Scarlet Monastery though, as far as the other wings are concerned, would also be the respawning patrols, which, if forgotten about, could either leave your party member dead if they head out of the dungeon alone, or can make for very bad situations if you need to run out of the dungeon. For the Razorfen Downs, one of the more dangerous dungeons you can tackle on the way to level 60, the most dangerous thing in here can be contentious, as the roaches, skeletons around Mordresh, and Amnanar are all very difficult in their own ways and can cause a lot of issues, but on average I would say Amnanar is the most dangerous. As the final boss of the dungeon, he is the most complicated of the bosses in here, with multiple very annoying abilities. First, he has a Frostbolt and a Frost Nova, limiting your party's movement, which can be quite troublesome with his ability called Amnanar's Wrath, which will kick his target super far back. This is problematic since he is on top of a large hill and it's a far way down. So if kicked at the wrong angle with nothing behind you, you will fly straight off the edge and either die to the fall damage or the enemies you land on top of. Lastly, he has the ability to summon Frost Spectres, which will summon 3 Ghost Adds. He can do this repeatedly, but they despawn at the end of the fight, so ideally your tank holds threat and you just burn the boss. But if your party is not all on the same page, you will get overwhelmed by the ghosts pretty quickly. Uldaman, one of the most dangerous dungeons for leveling players, has a lot of threats. While Arcadis might seem obvious, I would argue that the Ancient Stonekeeper and the trash around it are far more dangerous. This is because there are just a lot of enemies, with the various dwarves abundant in numbers and the stone stewards patrolling all around the area. These stewards have a ground tremor ability, allowing them to perform an AoE 2-second stun, which is extremely annoying, and if you have to fight a ton of dwarves and 1 or 2 stewards, it is super easy to die. And since the dungeon is like a maze, it can be really hard to run out. That isn't even mentioning accidentally pulling the Ancient Stonekeeper, which looks just like the Stone Stewards, but has the Sandstorms ability, which will summon winds that will slow you and silence you while you're in it, which is super annoying and very scary for obvious reasons. For Zul'Farrak, Antusul is probably the most dangerous enemy in here, with real mechanics that can actually be messed up. What this boss does is summon Servants of Antusul, which are Basilisk adds with an 8-second Petrify ability that also reduce armor. The boss will continue to spawn adds until he dies, so ideally you kill him very quickly to avoid extra ad spawns, and you interrupt the Petrifies as necessary. But if your group is not focused on Antusul, and some DPS try to kill the ads, the number of basilisks can swiftly spiral out of control. Additionally, Intusul has heals, which should be stopped, and an Earth Grab totem to keep you from running, all compiling to a somewhat difficult encounter. Next, in Mardon, the most likely way to die in here is the Princess Theridris herself, the final boss of the instance. The princess is level 51 with 23,000 HP, who packs quite a punch. She has 3 very dangerous abilities that can all be very threatening in their own ways. First, her repulsive gaze is an 8-second AoE fear, giving her ample time to chase and damage your tank, whilst your healer can't do anything if they are either feared or too far away. Her dust field acts as a knockback and a threat reset, which often results in healers or ranged DPS pulling aggro since they will continue to damage her during the dust field. This can be very bad combined with her thrash ability, which can stack up for multiple high damage auto attacks in an instant. This can easily one-shot a Clothy since she both hits very hard and is already a higher level, so only a couple stacks of thrash are needed to kill you. This is the first of many dangerous and problematic final dungeon bosses to look out for. Speaking of dangerous final bosses, in Sunken Temple, the Shade of Aranicus is far and away the most dangerous thing within the dungeon. This boss, like Theridris, also has a ton of health and does good damage, whilst also having a thrash. So immediately, he can do quite sizable damage very quickly and can one-shot your squishier party members. Additionally though, he has a War Stomp which will stun all players around him for 5 seconds, which is pretty long and happens consistently enough to be annoying. The worst of his abilities though is his Deep Slumber, which he will cast on the highest threat target periodically, putting them to sleep for 15 seconds while also making them invulnerable. This sleep is not dispellable, so someone will have to face tank it, usually your tank. This means ideally you want 2 tanks for this fight, so when one person is slept, the other picks up aggro. But without 2 tanks, this fight can be extremely scary. Within 15 seconds, Aranicus can easily run over and one-shot your healer with Thrash. This might be one of, if not the most dangerous dungeon bosses for hardcore if you aren't prepared. Also note, if you attack Aranicus without killing every dragon in the dungeon, they all aggro and run straight to you. For Blackrock Depths, there are a lot of dangerous areas, such as the Grim Guzzler, the various Fire Lords, and Emperor Tharsin, and his boss room. But I think the most dangerous thing in here has to be the Torch Room. This massive room has hundreds of mobs within it, all densely packed with numerous patrols about. While all the enemies in here are not elite and have low health, it is easy to get overwhelmed by their sheer numbers. The most common way this happens is due to weird social aggro mechanics, in which the packs will chain pool one after the other, ending in almost half the room being aggroed at some points. In scenarios like this, unless you have a really good mage or two, running is usually the only option, but since the room is so big, it can be very scary and quite hard to do this. As for Lower Blackrock Spire, I would say overpooling is probably the most common way you're going to die in this part of the dungeon. A lot of the trash packs in here have upwards of 5 or 6 enemies to handle at once, so pulling smart with proper CC is almost essential if you are running this as a 5-man group. If you happen to pull an extra pack, getting threat on every enemy while also managing the kicks in here is super tough, and it could easily result in a death or even a wipe depending on where you are in the dungeon, so it is super important to be careful and position and pull properly. Looking at Upper Blackrock Spire, General Dracasath is by far the most dangerous enemy within, as he is very tanky and does ridiculous damage and has 2 guards. With the common kiting strat, most groups can isolate Dracasath and do the ads first, but even by himself, he is dangerous. His Conflagrate will do crazy damage, require your group to reposition, and requires a tank swap, all putting immense pressure on the healers. His Cleave, Thunderclap, and Fire Nova can all do immense AoE damage, so even standing near him is dangerous if you aren't near full health. I have seen many encounters go very wrong very quickly when fighting this enemy, and even the most geared of players can fall victim to him. For Scholomance, Rattlegore and his entire boss room are extremely threatening and shouldn't be underestimated. Rattlegore himself has a War Stomp for an AoE stun, and since most people fight him in a hallway, this can hit usually 2 or 3 people at once. He also does a lot of damage with his strike ability. This can be really bad if you accidentally pull him in addition to another ad or 2, as the Risen constructs here are arguably just as or more dangerous as he is and can be easily social aggroed. If no Shackle Undead goes out, these enemies can do crazy AoE damage with their Thrash Sweeping Strikes combo and their Cleave. Pretty often these constructs will be fighting the tank, and a Rogue or Feral Druid will be right next to them, and before they know it, they are one-shot by a Sweeping Strikes Thrash combo. On to Strat Undead. What will kill you here is not very specific, but is simply just the sheer amount of trash in this dungeon. There are so many enemies covering almost every square inch of this side of Stratholme, and that makes pulling strategically in here really important. Many of the trash mobs in here are casters and need to be line of sighted. The super fast gargoyle patrols are the cause of most issues here, as they tend to cause a lot of unwanted aggro chains from any direction. And even a pool of 2 or 3 packs can be almost irredeemable and require your group to run out. Basically in this dungeon, even while clearing trash, you can never let up. But don't get me wrong, the bosses are still dangerous, and there are many in here who pack quite the punch. Nearby in Strat Live, the most dangerous area is the Scarlet Cathedral at the end of the instance, particularly the hallways just before Balnazar. There are a lot of really scary elite packs in here that do an absurd amount of damage. The main ones to note are the Crimson Battle Mages with their Blast Wave and Arcane Explosion doing crazy AoE damage. The monks also have a Thrash, and the sorcerers with their Arcane Might boosted Arcane Bolts hit really hard, while also having a Polymorph for utility. These mob packs in this hallway are super dangerous since you will be pretty closed in and prone to being hit by these strong AoEs. It is very easy for even really geared tanks to just get disintegrated if you are unlucky in here, and your entire group will need to pay a lot of attention to not die. Now lastly for Dire Maul, I would say that all the wings are pretty dangerous for the same reasons, and that is just how deadly the large trash packs are in here, in combination with patrolling enemies and bosses. If proper CC isn't used, it's very easy to get overwhelmed by a lot of enemies in here. Every wing has its handful of mobs with a lot of dangerous abilities at their disposal, such as the Gordok Brutes and Captains or the Phase Lashers. So many trash packs in this dungeon can spiral out of control if even one extra enemy is pulled, so it is very important to be aware in this dungeon. And that concludes the video on the most likely way every dungeon will kill you in WoW Classic Hardcore. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss another. Leave a comment on anything you think I should have mentioned in this video. Anyways...